All right, we are live, guys, with another episode of the Win or Tilt Show, and we're going to be focusing on this one, USFL player props, because PrizePicks right now is the only site that has player props that I've seen for USFL. So shout out PrizePicks, and shout out Roast Umber for sponsoring this stream. You can use the code DKDFS for 20% off your order, but yeah, I'm excited to talk some USFL. I've been, the last few days, we didn't have NBA games yesterday. All I've been doing is just digging into USFL. So I'm super excited to talk about it. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, same. I mean, this reminds me, I was betting on AAF. I was betting on XFL. XFL, you and I talked about this off stream, but that was the greatest run of my gambling career. I did not lose once. So it was absolutely amazing. It felt like I was printing free money. And that's kind of the benefit of getting into these some of these lower leagues is that there's a lot more edge and not as many people put as much research into it. And it's not something that you can really just like look at a guy and be like, oh, he's automatically going to do well. So that's where we have a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah. So, guys, again, if you do enjoy the content, just make sure to hit the like button, subscribe. Those things are important. But I want to start it off with saying, for week one, when in doubt, take the under, right? Because there's not a lot of information out there right now. There's a little bit, but not much. Some teams, for example, we have, who is it? New York or New Jersey, I should say. We don't even know who's starting yet between Perez and DeAndre Johnson. And there's just a lot of unknowns. And I think there's a lot of variance, especially with wide receiver. Right now, like, for example, on DraftKings, they have the depth charts just based on where they took them in the draft. So we don't even know if that's going to be, how they're going to be utilized on the field. So there's a lot of unknowns. I think, the biggest edge here is focusing on, teams, guys that are shorthanded at positions, right? So like teams that, for example, only have 2 running backs as opposed to majority of the league have 3. There's a few teams that only have 2. So that just means more opportunity for those guys. But that's really where our own focus is. Shorthanded teams, take advantage of that. And again, when in doubt, take the under. Any general tips you have for USFL?
I agree with what you said on when in doubt, take the under. I would definitely say for week one, don't go crazy. There's so much that we don't know yet. There's a guy that, we might even talk about today where we're like, we like this guy and he might not even play. Those are the things you have to keep in mind. I think looking for correlation, AKA like 2 guys have played together before, whether a quarterback and a wide receiver, whether it's a coach who's coached that quarterback previous, things like that. And then I'm always going to lean on guys that kind of have experience in leagues like this. So even, we'll get into it, but like Jordan Tiamu at quarterback, like he was in the XFL. He was great in the XFL. I loved watching him play. And then I think can't remember what team he was on in the NFL, but he played. He was a backup in the NFL for a little bit last year. So he's somebody with experience that I really like, and somebody who we've seen play in some of these smaller leagues, and that's something I think you have to keep in mind too.
Yeah, and you can also look into the coaches, right? That's something I've been doing, taking a deep dive of the coaches and how they like running the offense. There's a few coaches in this league that really like spreading it out and pushing the pace. And I think you're going to feel a little more confident targeting players in offenses like that. There's also a few coaches that really like slowing it down and ground and pound. And maybe you have more confidence in the running backs for coaches like that. So those are all things I think we have to factor in for week one here with just not a lot of information on the table. But I think we can start it off here. You want to start off with the quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Because there's one that stands out to me right now. I know I said when in doubt, take the under, but there's one that stands out I think is a little bit too low. And that's going to be Alex Magoo right now at 11 fantasy points. So here's my reasoning for liking the over actually on him. At Birmingham, their coach is Skip Holtz, and he is known for running 4 wide receiver sets and hurry up offense. So if you take a look at some of the other quarterbacks and their projections, you have Kyle Slater at 18.5, Brian Scott at 17.5. I'm not sure why these 2 are so much higher than a guy like Alex Magoo at only 11 fantasy points. All 3 have coaches that are known for trying to push the pace. So for me, I think there's a big discrepancy there. None of those guys really have any rushing upside. I would say Slaughter probably is the guy that could run the ball the best, but really there's only a couple quarterbacks in this league that are really dual threat quarterbacks. So I know I said when in doubt, take the under, but I think Alex McGough, 11 fancy points, feels a little bit too low. For you, what props stand out quarterback wise?
Honestly, a rushing prop, and that's Jordan Tiamu at 26.5 rushing yards. He is a dual threat quarterback, and I like that rushing prop a lot. I definitely agree with you on the Alex. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name.
It is. I know. Some were saying McGough. I think it actually is Magoo because I looked it up and someone said it's like goo, like Goo.
Well, I hope it's McGough because that's better. But let's assume it's Magoo. Magoo over 11. I mean, this is a league where there's not going to be a lot of great defense. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of continuity on defense. So I definitely think you're going to see guys like Alex Magoo get over 11. I don't think that's asking a lot. And I think that number's far too low. I think it's probably more likely we're going to see a lot of quarterbacks probably in the 15 to 20 range. And then there's always going to be the guys that kind of pop off for that 20, 22, 25 points. So I think you can confidently take Alex Magoo over 11.
Yeah, and again, if you just look at other quarterbacks, I said they have, where's Clayton Thorson? I saw Thorson was up to 18 fantasy points, and he was
they dropped him down to 15 now.
He wasn't great, so I just don't understand why they have some of these quarterbacks 6-7 points ahead of Magoo. All those guys you mentioned are going to be in quarterbacks that are going to push the pace. So I think I like the Magoo over, and then I think you could definitely totally fine taking the under on guys like Brian Scott and Kyle Slaughter. I just think it's a little high, and I think Magoo is a little bit low. So we can take a look at the passing yards too for quarterbacks. So they have Slaughter and Brian Scott for 200 plus yards. Magoo only at 160. So I just think that stands out as a little bit too wide of a gap for me for quarterbacks that I'm not convinced Brian Scott and Kyle Slaughter are that much better than Alex Magoo. And like I said, all three are with teams that want to play fast.
So I think the reason why they have Brian Scott priced the way that he's priced and his props the way they are is because his coach, he was in the spring league, which I never really watched, but apparently he had the same coach and also had multiple of the same players on offense with him on the spring league. So he's got at least going into it with a little bit more continuity than some of these other guys. They're kind of going in there with guys they've never played with.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, it's the spring league. It's I don't know if I put too much emphasis into that. So
we're looking for anything right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, Shea Patterson's fantasy props was at 10.5. I watched him play plenty when he was at Michigan. He sucks, in my opinion, but 10 is still so low for a quarterback. I mean, we're really looking for you to get 150 passing yards and a touchdown. I don't think that's really asking a ton, especially because he does have some good maneuverability at quarterback. So I wouldn't be shocked if he rushes for 20, 30 yards. So I definitely think I would not take the under on 10.5. That is just so low for a quarterback. And I know they're not expecting much out of him, but still, that is just shockingly low to me.
Yeah, he does have a little bit of dual threat ability. Again, I know from watching Michigan games, he's average quarterback. I don't he was the number one pick here in the USFL. But the one thing I will say is there were rumors that possibly Paxton Lynch, the backup, could be getting some work. So I think that would be the only concern there if that is in fact true. There's no guarantee that happens, but I think that's kind of good for quarterback. Unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's good with me.
Okay. So running back, like I said, I think we want to focus on teams that are a little bit more shorthanded. So there's one guy that I do like the over in right now, and that's going to be Tony Brooks James. So let me just bring up Birmingham on DraftKings. So on the injury report, they transferred Jordan Chun to the practice squad. That was their third running back. We have Bobby Holly, who's more the fullback. So that means there's only two running backs here in Brooks James and in Marble. And Birmingham is a team that, I think will utilize a 3-down back in Brooks James. So right now they have his rushing yards there at 40.5, and they do have, I think, his fantasy score at 8.5. He is a guy that can catch some passes. He's a little bit undersized. Played at Oregon, so he is one that I think of it. Assuming there's only 2 backs, so right now it's looking like that. Also, for what it's worth, it's the home team. Again, I don't put a ton of emphasis into that, but I think he will be utilized a good amount here. So I think either the rushing yards or the fantasy scores look good for leaning over on Brooks James.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I definitely like what you're saying on looking at teams that don't have a lot of depth because there's just not many guys that are going to fill that position. Now, I like B.J. Emmons at running back. And the only thing is I do expect Tampa's offense to be one of the better offenses just based off the players that they have. But I am also high on Jordan Ta'amu, so it's tough for me to. I wouldn't probably put them together because obviously anything Jordan does, BJ is probably not doing as well. Because if I remember correctly, BJ is not an outstanding receiver. Now it's been a while since some of these guys have played, but I definitely like his rushing prop at over 50.5, and that's something that if you don't think that game's going to be as high scoring, maybe you take that ground and pound approach instead of looking at it like Jordan Ta'amu is going to ball out. Though, like Dallas said, I still very much like the over on Jordan Ta'amu rushing yards.
Yeah. Ta'amu is a guy that obviously does have that rushing upside. He wasn't as dynamic as PJ Walker in the XFL, but good game manager and can get it done on the ground. But yeah, back to Emmons. That would be the only thing I would say is that Ta'amu can keep it himself. But I do like that. Again, they only have 2 running backs on the roster. So I think there is a better chance that he can have success with only competing for one other guy with touches. And like I said, there's not a lot of news out there right now. So you do want to focus more on the shorthanded teams if you are going to look to an over.
Yeah. By the way, just pulling up XFL stats. So Jordan Ta'amu in the 5 games that they had, it's crazy. I forgot it was only 5 games. But he rushed for 77, 32, 14, 63, and 31. So
for the 5 games, he hit that over mark.
Yep.
Okay. There is one running back. I think you could possibly lean the under. It's a little bit scary, but it's Stevie Scott at 50.5 rushing yards. And my real reasoning here is taking a look at Michigan's roster. If Corbin, who was limited to a hamstring injury, if he plays, they're going to have 3 running backs. If he misses, then I probably stay away. So that's another situation. We'll keep an eye on that. We should get another injury report on Friday. I saw a lot of them came out Thursday night, but keep an eye on that one. If he ends up giving it a go and there's 3 running backs, I think there's a chance all 3 could be utilized. So that would be one I would lean under, but I would probably wait on that until we get that Corbin news because if Corbin's out, then it'll be only 2 running backs. So that's one's kind of a wait and see for me.
Yeah. For me, I think one of my wait and sees is Groshek. And that's just because I don't know exactly if it's going to play out where he's the number 1 back like they're expecting him to. Madre London is behind him, and I like Madre a good amount. Also, have seen him a good amount play in his college career. So I wouldn't be shocked if Madre ends up taking some of the usage away from Garrett. Not saying that you should take the under because it does seem like based off like stat projections, they actually have Groshek pretty high up there. But I would not be shocked if Madre London ended up being the number 1 back for Pitt.
Madre London put up huge numbers overseas. I don't know if you saw that. He was like over 2,000 yards. I forget, it was like a European league or something. And the next closest was like 1,000 behind him. So Madre's shown what he can do against lesser competition. Again, he was decent in Michigan State. I remember him.
Yeah.
One other thing to keep an eye on here is Mikey Daniel is a fullback. So they do have 3 running backs technically on the roster, but one's a fullback. So it's only Groshek and London I expect to be getting carries here. Now, the tricky part about Groshek is he's technically can be utilized as a fullback too. Like he's a big bruiser. Yeah. So will he be a guy that they lean on a ton? Or I think there's a better chance it could be London. That would be kind of the do-it-all back, where Groshek may be that short yardage back. So, that's one there's a little bit of unknown right now. But if I had to guess between who I think would be the lead back, actually, I think it's Madre London for me.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about wide receiver. And here's one where this is a situation where there's just not a lot of information out there. Depth charts, maybe we get some clarity going into tomorrow, but right now there's just so much unknown that when in doubt, I would just lean a lot of unders for wide receiver. Again, I don't have any super strong takes on a lot of these guys. Like, for example, like Taywan Taylor, I know he played in the NFL, but he was drafted 4th, and he's projected for like 30 receiving yards. If he in fact is the number 4 wide receiver, I don't know if he can get to 30, receiving yards. You have Cheyenne O'Grady, who's a tight end. I know he's a decent pass catcher, but he's at 25 and a half. I think just like looking at, teams that maybe are more run heavy, like, let's see, Pittsburgh, I think will be a little bit more run heavy. We already got that confirmation that they do want to ground and pound. Groshek indicated that he tends to lean heavily on the ground game. So if you look at Pittsburgh wide receivers, they have 5 wide receivers. I think there's 2 on PrizePicks here. We have Jeff Thomas, Brendan Mack, or they have 3 actually, and Bailey Geither. I think that's who pronounced his name. So I would be inclined to take unders on guys like this for a team that we know has already said they want to come out and ground and pound the ball, and there's just unknown with wide receivers and how they're going to be utilized, really.
Yeah. I'm far more likely to take the under on a wide receiver on his passing or receiving yards, but fantasy, obviously, you have to keep in mind there can always be a touchdown, and I don't know exactly how. I haven't looked exactly at how it's going to play out. With you can go for 1, 2, or 3 after a touchdown. So I don't know how that exactly works out. If they catch a 3-pointer essentially after a touchdown, what is that? How many points do they get for that? These are things that we're going to see. How often do teams even go for 3? I don't know, right?
We saw in the XFL they did it similar, and like a majority of the teams just went for 1.
Yeah. So we don't know, but if you think a team's going to be a little bit more pass heavy, you could think about from a fantasy points total, if they're getting a 2-point conversion or a 3-point conversion, that might be 2 or 3 points based off how PrizePicks is placing that.
Yep, I agree with that. Are there any receiver props you like, any unders you like, or anyone you're really confident in their role?
Taywan Taylor, when it came out, it was like 45. So that's the thing.
They got that under heavy.
Yeah, super heavy. I would expect Sean Poindexter for New Orleans to be their top wide receiver. So I would expect him to get pretty high usage. And then same thing with Isaiah Zuber. Those are 2 where I'd feel more confident on taking their overs. And then outside of that, though, no, most of these I'll be taking unders. Derek Willis actually for Tampa Bay. I forgot about him. Derek Willis for Tampa Bay. And that's just me. I'm kind of going after the guys I think are going to be the number 1 wide receivers for these teams. If it's anything like the XFL, they do tend to lean pretty heavy on the top guys, and then it's pretty slim pickings after that. So tight ends, I'm not as big with. It's just not. I don't expect tight ends to do a ton, but I definitely lean on the top wide receivers for some of these teams that I do think will be able to sling it a little bit.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Derek Willis did play on the Browns for a couple years. He actually made the regular season roster. Now, he did retire but came back, so how much juice does he have left? But he does have NFL experience. One of the few guys that have actually made – there's a lot of guys that were on practice squads. Willis was a guy that actually made the Cleveland active roster for 2 years. So I think he has that experience. He has NFL experience, and would think he is going to be one of the top wide receiver options for the USFL. So could definitely get down with taking the over on Willis just for his NFL experience alone.
Right. So, a lot of it's going to be wait and see. It's going to be really interesting to watch these games, kind of see how it plays out, see how high scoring it is, see if teams are pounding the rock a lot or if they're passing it. It's going to be a really interesting thing. And that's why I would definitely tread lightly on what you're betting this weekend. A lot of this is speculation. A lot of this is just looking at what some of these guys did a few years ago, and there hasn't been a long preseason before this or anything like that. So this is we're discovering a lot of this just as you guys are. So I would definitely say tread very lightly in this.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been doing Twitter searches the last couple of days, just trying to find any information I can. There's really not much out there. Hopefully we get some more clarity on this going into tomorrow. But like I said, when in doubt, target shorthanded teams, and when in doubt, straight up, just take the under because there's just so many unknowns. And one other thing to mention too, I don't know if you saw the Vegas odds when these games got announced were like in the mid 50s. they've been bet all the way down to like 40. I thought that was
Yeah.
extremely, like way too high. You saw the same thing with the XFL. These games are not going to be that high scoring, right? So take that for what it's worth. Don't expect games to be like the NFL, average total mid 50s. Expect a lot of, 35 to 40 total points scored in these games. So offenses are definitely not going to be as dynamic as they are in the NFL.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, it's definitely going to be something where it takes a second to get that continuity between the quarterback and the wide receivers and things like that. And that's why, once again, when you find correlation between guys that have played together in the past, that's a huge advantage because, that's a big, important part of all of this is that you have to have your timing right with your wide receivers. And that's a lot when there's a guy that you're throwing the ball to that you've never thrown the ball to, and you're trusting him on a, 15-yard out route. And then he runs a 20-yard hook, right? It's things like that, until you have that sort of practice, there's going to be a lot of interceptions. I would assume there's going to be a lot of turnovers in general. So I don't expect it to be too pretty. I'm just hoping, to be honest, that it's entertaining because I would love to see one of these leagues catch on. I know the XFL is planning on coming back next year, but I love football. I'm excited for this. I'm hoping it does really well. I'm hoping it's exciting. It's not a bunch of blowouts tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch all these games, to be honest.
Same.
So I'm really, really excited. I watched a lot of the XFL. I thought it was going pretty well, obviously, before COVID shut it down. So hopefully one of these leagues do catch on. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year if both leagues go on at close to the same time. But anything else, or do you want to wrap it up on that? I think we covered a lot of USFL. Do you have anything else you want to say, or do you want to get out of here?
No, I would say pay attention to Twitter. And if there's news that comes out, like, we'll talk about it and things like that. But it'll be, more interesting to do a recap. Maybe we do a recap on Monday and talk about what we watched over the weekend. Because just like you, I'll be watching all the games too. And I think it'll be super entertaining. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, guys, again, if you're looking for more in-depth content, I am covering the USFL DFS on Patreon, so you can check that out. Again, the sponsor of the stream was Roast Umber. Make sure to use that discount code DKDFS for 20% off. But that's going to wrap it up, guys. Appreciate you watching. As always, good luck on these contests, and we will see you in the next stream.
See you guys.